We're good. How are you?
Good. Very good.
I'm Brando. This is my friend Arianna.
Arianna. Hi, I'm Jeff.
Okay, so...
Okay. The stage is yours.
Yeah, let's just get into it. So the first question we have is, what was your previous life like prior to incarceration?
Well, I was in business for myself. I was chairman of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. I was chairman of the Long Island Board of the American Heart Association.
Oh, wow.
I was a Broadway devotee living on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and really enjoying life. I mean, it was quite a life before I went away.
Oh, wow. Sounds like a lot of experience. So
yes, definitely.
So, the second question is, if you had prior work experience, can you explain what that was? But I guess you just kind of did that, but you can go more deep into it.
Well, I've done many, many different things. I'm 70 years old, and today marks 50 years since I originally went to work for my dad, October 12th, 1970.
Oh, wow.
And that was as a food broker. I've had many, many different careers. Did you ever hear of Juicy Juice?
No.
It's a product in the supermarkets. I was the VP of sales and marketing for that. After that, I ran a restaurant chain called Cookie Steak Pubs way before your time. And I did Chapter 11. You know what Chapter 11 is?
No.
Chapter 11 is a form of corporate bankruptcy. It's where a company restructures. A lot of big companies now, because of COVID, are going through Chapter 11, like J. Crew, Neiman Marcus, J.C. Penney. These companies are all going through Chapter 11. It's a process by which companies can restructure their debt and come out healthier. And I did consulting for mainly small businesses going through Chapter 11. And that was fascinating to me. As a matter of fact, on several occasions, I don't remember the professor's name. I'm getting old. But I did lecture at an Adelphi business class on Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I was invited to do that a few times.
I think you told us about that, yeah.
Yeah, that was really pretty interesting. And then I started buying companies out of bankruptcy. Again, probably stuff you never heard of, but Pudgy's Famous Chicken, which was a Long Island-based company. Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips, Burritoville, which was in Manhattan, Wall Street Deli, Ritter's Frozen Custard. And then I sold those and I went back to doing some consulting until I went to work for the Albert Ellis Institute in Manhattan, running that, which is where I ran into a little issue.
Okay.
Well, the question is, how was your educational experience prior to incarceration?
I have a bachelor's in sociology from Brooklyn College. Took a few postgraduate courses, but never got a postgraduate degree. I should have gone for my MBA, but didn't.
Okay.
And while you were growing up, did you have any goals and ambitions that...
Yes. I always wanted to be a lawyer. And which my daughter is right now, although she doesn't practice. Foolish me, when I was married the first time and I was 22 or 23 years old, my wife's parents wanted to send me to law school and pay for it, free, complete.
Oh, wow.
And I was working for my dad, making good money, and I said, no, I don't want to go back to school, forget that. Therein lies the biggest regret of my life.
Oh, wow.
That I didn't go to law school. But we all have regrets, correct?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you guys are too young to have regrets, but you will. Trust me, as you get older. How old are you guys?
We're 18.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're freshmen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Very nice.
Okay. So, part 2 of the interview, the first question is, what skills did you gain while incarcerated, and what are you most proud of?
The skills that I gained were in 2 of the 3 prisons that I was in. I was away for 6 years. Okay. And in 2 of the 3 prisons, all New York State prisons, I worked in the law library, which really, led into what I really should have been doing my entire life. And especially when I was in Otisville, not the federal Otisville where all the celebrities go, but the New York State Otisville, they're right next to each other. My partner and I in the law library, and this is what I'm most proud of, got new parole hearings for a whole bunch of guys. We did an immense number of parole appeals, and 10 guys went home on our interviews, on our they're called de novo interviews. We were responsible for helping 10 guys get out of prison on parole. One of whom is a very good friend of mine and was actually innocent. And right now we're trying to get his whole conviction overturned. But I was able to get him out on parole by proving to the parole board that he didn't do what he was accused of. He was accused of hiring somebody to murder his girlfriend's husband. And he served 25 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit.
Wow. And
which happened more than you can know.
Yeah. What does the word parole mean, if you could explain that?
Okay, yes. For example, parole is when you're released from prison. You're very frequently either on parole or probation. New York State calls it community supervision. You have to report to a parole officer. You have a curfew. You can't leave the state. You're you're allowed to be out of prison, but very tightly controlled. My sentence was 3 to 9 years, meaning 3 years was the minimum, 9 years was the maximum. 2/3 of that, which is 6 years, is what's called a conditional release date. I appeared before the parole board 4 times during my 6 years and was denied every time. I helped other guys get out, and I couldn't get myself out. But I was let out after 6 years on my conditional release date. Now, I could have served up to 3 years on parole. It's like probation, really. I was fortunate enough to be let off parole after 1 year. So my sentence is now completely over and completely discharged. I am finished. I don't have a parole officer. I don't have to report to anybody. I don't have a curfew. I can drink. I can smoke a joint if I want to smoke a joint. I can do whatever I want, which you can't do when you're on parole.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Because there are urine tests as often as sometimes, as often as you go for parole, which can be as little as, as often as you report. It can be as little as once a week, or in my case, it was once every 4 months.
Oh,
but still, if a parole officer shows up and decides to do a urine test, you don't want to take a chance. When I did not touch anything for the 6 years that I was away or the 1 year that I was on parole.
Wow. How did your mindset change as a result of your mindfulness meditation practice and learning experience?
I became far more patient than I was before. I remember sitting in the TV room in prison, particularly in Green. I was unfortunate enough to be in Green Correctional Facility, which is probably the worst medium in New York State. I saw guys get cut and beat up every day. Wow. Then I ended up doing 2.5 years in Otisville, which is probably the best in New York State. And it's just run the best out of any other state prison. I remember sitting in Green, in particular, sitting in the TV room with a bunch of guys watching the news, and you'd see tremendous traffic jams and reports, and I would sit there and say time and time again, I would give anything to be sitting in that traffic jam right now instead of where I am. And now, when I get stuck in traffic, I just think back to that, and I don't mind the traffic. It taught me patience, and it taught me what's really important. The first thing that my son said when all this happened was, now you will learn who your friends really are. And that was very prophetic. He was absolutely correct. Because my real friends are still my real friends. The ones who were fair weather friends don't want to have anything to do with me because of what I did. Okay. I can live with that. I don't particularly care. Mm-hmm. But I learned patience, and I learned about what's really important in life.
Yes. Patience is super important, and I believe
yes, it
that
is.
It can take you so far.
Yeah, and I bet that even when you're in the traffic jams, you're super present in the moment.
Absolutely present. You know what? That's a very good point, Arianna. One of the other things that it taught me was how to be in the moment and not daydream and think about the future or think about the past.
Yeah.
In my position now, it's really important to stay in the present, because if I start thinking about the past, it can be depressing. If I start thinking about the future, it can be depressing. My present right now is good.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gainfully employed. I live in a nice place. I have my family. I have enough friends and things to keep me busy. I certainly am busy all day. So that's good. So staying in the moment is critically important. And yes, that is one of the things that I've learned. And that I give a lot of credit to Network for. The sessions that we had, which are, I understand, I have friends who are still there, are hardly going on right now because of COVID. They've just really kind of suspended everything, which is unfortunate, but hopefully things will turn around again.
Could you describe the service programs you were involved while incarcerated?
Primarily, it was Network and working in the law library. I was not allowed to do very much programming because I have a college degree. And I guess they try to save the programs for those who need them more. And it was assumed that I was okay. If I heard from one more person when I was in prison, you don't kind of belong here. But I did something wrong, so I guess I did. Maybe not for 6 years, but I had to pay the price for what I did. I accept that. But there were a lot of things that I was not permitted to do because they try to save that for the people who really need it. And I get that. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Can you describe your experiences with fellow incarcerated individuals in terms of challenges and meaningfulness?
Okay. Most of the time, especially when I was in Otisville, because I was so involved in helping guys go home, I was treated very, very, very well by most inmates and the COs. Were there problems along the way? Yes, there were problems along the way because it's prison. There was a guy when I was in Riverview, which is literally on the Canadian border. You can see the bridge to Canada from the yard, and it's 30 degrees below zero there. It's a horrible place. There was a guy in my dorm, and the entire time that I was away, except when I was on Rikers Island in New York, I was in dorms, not cells. But there was a guy in my dorm who was a major drug addict. Drugs are rampant in prison. And this guy was always getting in trouble. And a fellow inmate by the name of Animal was going to beat him up. And I gave him 2 pouches of tobacco. I don't smoke, but tobacco in prison is currency. So I would buy the maximum number that you were allowed to buy pouches every week, which, as I recall, was 9. I gave him 2 pouches, and what I wanted in return was 2 pouches. I mean, the guy got into a lot of trouble and claimed that I and another inmate threatened him and tried to extort from him. And I remember the sergeant calling me down to his office. What is this about? You're threatening another inmate? And I said, Sergeant, the last time I threatened somebody was my daughter. I threatened to take away her birthday when she was 15 years old. Ask me how well that went over. And you'll see how many people I've threatened since then. I was put in the box. Do you know what the box is?
I think so.
Solitary confinement.
Yes.
For 8 days. The 8 worst days of my life.
What is that?
Okay, you're in a room. It's a cell. No contact with anybody. Nothing to read. Nothing to do. No phone calls. No TV. Everything, including your bathroom, is right within your cell. You're allowed out 3 days a week in handcuffs to take a shower while a CO is standing there making sure that nothing is going on. And I was actually found not guilty because I was not guilty. And there were 4 COs, correction officers, guards, who came to my defense, and a sergeant who came to my defense and told the hearing officer there was no way that I could have done what they accused me of, which I didn't.
Yeah.
The other guy, who was also innocent, was found guilty and sentenced to 90 days in the box, which is torture. This guy who got 90 days used to tell everybody in the dorm, don't do anything to this guy. give him a chance to pay everybody back. If we send him to the box, nobody's going to get anything.
Wow.
But there were gang members involved who were threatening him that, no matter where you go, we have boys and we'll find you. So it got pretty nasty. I was the lucky one. When I was let out of the box after 8 days, all of your belongings go in what they call draft bags. They're large, white bags that you just stuff all your property into. And all of your property, it can fit into 4 bags. I mean, that's the most you're allowed to have. That's all of your food, all of your clothing, that's everything you own. And I was wheeling a laundry cart back to my dorm from the box with all my belongings. And I saw a friend walking across the compound, and he looked at me and he yelled, "You're out! I can cancel the order of free Bernie t-shirts." That's what they used to call me, Bernie. And I got out the day before Thanksgiving, and I walked back to my dorm to a standing ovation. And the next day, we had a feast. My friends prepared a huge meal. And my only consolation was the guy who accused me of doing what I didn't do was sitting in the box, eating mess hall turkey on his bed next to his toilet while I was in the dorm literally having a feast with my friends.
Wow.
And there were a few things. I never got into a fight in 6 years, so I wanted to.
Of course. What do you value in your work experience in terms of future career or job?
Okay, right now I am running a medical billing company in Staten Island. I'm working for very good friends who were very good to me when I came out. They were really very, very helpful. I describe myself as overworked, underpaid, and very grateful for the opportunity because I see a lot of friends who, many of whom were convicted of white-collar crimes as I was, just financial stuff, no violence, no drugs. And it's very difficult to get a job. And they wonder, do you tell your prospective employer about your criminal history? If you do, you may be knocking yourself out of the box. If you don't, you could be killing yourself in that way too. I have one friend who, when he got out, got a great job with the NDA, working in their office. And he loved it. He was really doing well until somebody Googled him and found out, and he had a very unusual name. If you Google me, you've got to go through like 6 or 7 pages until you find what I did. But he had a very unusual name, so it came up immediately. And somebody walked into his office, said, "Pack your things and leave now."
Wow.
I have another friend who was also convicted of grand larceny. He stole money to pay for the medical bills of his ill daughter. And he served, I think, 2 years in prison. And he's been fired from 3 jobs since he's been out the last year and a half. As soon as they find out, they fire you. I advise people, just be honest about it. If they're not going to hire you, they're not going to hire you. That's better than worrying about, is the shoe going to drop? Are you going to get fired? Just be honest about it.
Yeah, I agree. So do you feel like right now you're overworked and underpaid? That's something that I got confused about.
Yes. Am I doing the kind of work that I was doing before where I was making a lot of money? And no, I'm not. Okay. I'm running a small office. So, actually I'm still the boss. I report to the owner of the company, but I'm basically running this business on a day-to-day basis. But I'm not paid what I should be paid, and much because the company can't afford it, not because they don't, they don't want to. I'm paid what they can afford to pay me, and I'm doing work that I should have an assistant doing, but we can't afford to hire an assistant either. So I'm overworked, underpaid, but grateful for the opportunity. And the people I work for are very, very good to me in many ways. They're like family. So I don't mind being overworked and underpaid. I do sometimes, but would I like to be back on the Upper East Side, going to Broadway shows and eating out virtually every night? Assuming COVID wasn't here, yes, that could be fun. But you know what? I've also learned, as I said before, what's really important.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that to me, I kept saying when I was away, all I want when I get out is to spend time with my family. I have a son, 2 beautiful grandchildren, and a daughter, and I get, I don't see them as much as I would like because of what's going on. But I do see them and I do speak to them and I have a relationship and that's what matters.
Yeah. Exactly. What fields are you interested in pursuing for work at the present time?
I'm actually considering, and a couple of people have asked me to get involved in this, in doing parole appeals for inmates.
Oh, yeah.
Using what I learned. Yeah. I'm doing one now for a friend of mine. And I mean, it's a little challenging because I don't have the law library here. Mm-hmm. And when I had the law library, I had LexisNexis, which, is great. Yeah. And if I want LexisNexis, I have to go into the city and go to a free law library. And I don't even know if I can do that right now, but I will if necessary. But even an attorney friend of mine who knows what I did has said that he would work with me on it. And we would file appeals or Article 7. An Article 78 proceeding is if an administrative decision is negative, you can file an Article 78 proceeding in court. And you're actually asking the court to intervene. That's how I got a lot of these guys out with Article 78s. The court cannot order the release of an inmate on an Article 78, but they can order a new parole here. And that's how I got them out.
I see.
And would you consider being able to get these guys into parole a skill? Because the next question talks about what skills did you develop after while incarceration and after?
How would you name that skill?
The skills that I developed while incarcerated are legal oriented. I mean, I spent 5 years working in law libraries. Yeah. And I got a tremendous amount of experience. And being somebody who was a wannabe lawyer for my whole life, that was a great experience for me. Now I have to be careful now because I can't cross the line, and I will not cross the line and do what's considered unauthorized practice of law, UPL. I'm not a lawyer. A very good friend of mine is in the middle of a divorce proceeding. And actually she's divorced, but her husband's not paying her. And I wrote what I consider to be an absolutely brilliant enforcement motion for her. But I can't go into court and argue it. I'm not allowed. And I can't put my name on anything because that's unauthorized practice of law. I can prepare documents for somebody to file pro se means? Yeah. It's Latin. It means for yourself. Literally means for yourself. So she can file it, or the inmates can file their parole appeals pro se. But I can prepare the papers. I cannot function as a lawyer. I can just do the paperwork. But that's the skill that I honed, and that's what I hope to make use of, supplementing what I'm doing now.
Yes. Yes.
Do your skills match your current position in a way that satisfy you? I don't think so, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
I was gonna say that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I feel like you could do a lot more with the skills that you have. With a better job.
I've done a lot of good for my boss's business. Mm-hmm. I have. I've turned things right side up when they were upside down for a long time. And business sucks, but at least now it's healthy. And that's what I did. And as far as I'm concerned, I've done my thing there. I would love to be able to move on. I'm not in a rush. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know that I will move on, but I would love to be able to. As my brother says, because of my financial situation, I will probably work until lunch on the day of my funeral. Retirement is just not in the cards for me. I get it. I have a great Social Security benefit because when I worked, I paid my taxes. And I get basically almost the maximum Social Security, but it's still not enough to live on.
Yeah. I see. Would you have been exposed to mindfulness had it not been for your time of incarceration? And how did you learn about network support services?
I don't know. I'd like to believe that I would have been exposed to mindfulness had I not been incarcerated, but I can't be sure. When I was younger, I was a real type A personality, and I outgrew that as I got older. I was calmer. I was much more mindful of life in general, but not to the extent that I am now. Mm-hmm. So the incarceration definitely had something to do with that, and out of all bad comes some good.
Of course.
Unless you die.
Yeah, I feel like that's another great skill. Because if it affects you for like the rest of your life, you're able to live more fully.
Correct.
In a way.
Correct. And you can, as long as you stay in touch with what's important. Yes. I'm friends on Facebook and Instagram with a lot of guys who I was away with. And it annoys me so much to see some of these guys. All they're interested in is designer labels and what celebrities they're meeting. Just such vain, vapid stuff that at this point in time means nothing to me. I mean, I've had all of that. And what good is it? What does it mean? It's nice to have if you can afford it, but that's not what's important. It's really not. And it annoys me to see these guys, some of whom spent almost a lifetime in prison, focusing on that. I will say that almost everybody who I know who came out of network has done something good with their lives. I was in the network dorm. There were 50 of us. 35 of them were lifers, meaning that their sentences were 25 years to life. And you get 25 to life if you commit murder. And these were guys who, for the most part, did something when they were young and high and stupid. And I'm not going to say made mistakes, because it's when you kill somebody, it's way beyond a mistake, even if it is. They took a human life. But the law says that the penalty for murder in the state of New York, the maximum is 25 to life. That means that you are entitled to be considered for parole after 25 years. And the parole board just doesn't agree with that. They're terrible. They are horrendous. And I think that the whole parole system should be abolished. The federal government uses what's called determinate sentencing, meaning you'll get sentenced to X number of months or X number of years in prison, and you're going to serve 85% of it. And if the crime is severe enough, you're going to be sentenced to life in prison, meaning you can never get out. You don't go before a parole board. So if in New York State, the maximum for murder in the second degree is 25 to life, then in my opinion, the sentence should be 25 years, period.
Yeah.
And the guys, 35 or 50 were lifers, and as far as I'm concerned, probably 32 of those guys were fully rehabilitated. And they could live next door to me very happily. I'd be happy to have them living next door to me. And these were guys who at one time or another committed murder. But the programs and things that they go through while in prison, the ones who pay attention, and maybe the guys who were in network were the ones who paid attention, but they've turned their lives around. My partner in the law library was convicted of murder at the age of 15. He murdered a neighbor child. And his sentence was the maximum at the time for a youthful offender, which was 9 to life. He was in prison for 39 years. He got out of prison at 54. He was married while in prison. He had 2 children while in prison. He got a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. The children are called trailer babies. There are maximum security prisons, which thank God I was never in. Many of them have conjugal visits. You spend the weekend literally in a trailer with your spouse. You must be legally married. And this guy had 2 kids. They're grown. They were born while their father was in prison. They never saw their father outside of prison until they were older than you. They were in their 20s. But now he's out. He's leading a very productive life. His wife stood by his side the entire time. His kids stood by him the entire time.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And he's leading a very productive life. He should not have been in prison for 39 years.
Yeah.
That was absolutely unconscionable. But that's the parole board.
Yeah. Would your life have been different had you been practicing mindfulness prior to your incarceration?
Yes. I probably wouldn't have done what I did to cause me to be incarcerated.
And why do you think that?
Yes, my life would have been different, clearly.
Why do you think that?
Like, why would have mindfulness helped you?
Yeah.
Because mindfulness means that you're not just in the moment, but you're thinking. And had I been thinking clearly and rationally, I would not have done what I did, which was, frankly, to steal $2.5 million from a place that I was working for. I would not have done that. And it was not, well, when I say it was not greed, yeah, I guess there's always an element of greed in something like that. For me, it was probably more that ego. I did not want to admit failure, which was very foolish, especially given my background and knowing as much as I know about bankruptcy and reorganization. I could have gone bankrupt instead of stealing money to fix my business problems. And had I been practicing mindfulness, I think I would have been cognizant and aware enough to do the right thing instead of the wrong thing. And that's had a major impact on my life.
Yeah. Because it also helps you with your self-awareness and how to see failure in a way as, not failure, but something that can be a good thing or a change
Correct.
that you can apply.
Absolutely correct. I was lost in myself. Instead of being mindful of what I was doing versus what I could have been doing, I was lost in myself, and what I did was very foolish. And I pay a huge price even today. I pay a price for it every day of my life and will for the rest of my life. I know that I'm a convicted felon. And that has a big impact on my life.
Of course.
And again, I don't care about, I had a beautiful condo in Florida. I owned my apartment on the Upper East Side, free and clear. I mean, those things were nice, and for most of the time that I had those, it was because I was able to afford them. I mean, I had problems at the end, but I was, when I bought those, I was able to afford them. But that's not what's important.
Yeah, exactly.
I lived out of a steel locker for 6 years. And I look around at my apartment now. I've been out for 2.5 years, and I can't believe how much crap I have.
Yeah.
Well, you don't need a lot of things.
Yeah, you don't.
But it's easy and I think that's why mindfulness is so important just in general, because it's easy to get caught up in just what you think is important and what you think matters, but in reality it's just what everybody's doing. And then usually it's moments like that where you have a life-changing moment, or a moment where you realize it's too late to go back, but you have to realize, like, oh, I should have known what was important. I should have focused on this and this and then.
Yes, absolutely. I'm in a position now where I have complete control over this company's money. Could rob them blind and they would never know. But you know what? I know today I would not take a penny that is not mine. I have what I need, okay? Are there things that I would like to have? Sure. I have more than what I need. And even if I didn't have more than what I need, I would not take anything that is not mine ever, ever, ever again. One of the things that disturbed me the most about my crime was not just, and this goes to mindfulness, was not just the fact that I spent 6 years in prison. That's my fault. But the people who I worked with had infinite faith and trust in me. And I was actually doing great things there, turning that place around too. And I so totally betrayed that trust that for a time it was hard to live with. I'm learning to live with it. But to do that to good people who were good to me is very disturbing to me.
Yeah.
And being mindful, I know I could never do that to somebody again.
Yeah. And mindfulness can help so much with that, with like living with that and practicing it. Of course.
And I mean, the last question is, what are your goals for the future in terms of housing?
Going to a warmer climate at some point.
Are you currently in New York?
I'm in Staten Island, yes.
We're in New York.
Yes, you're going to Delphi, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know exactly where you are.
So that's your goal, just to go to somewhere that's warmer?
Eventually, yes, I would like to be someplace warmer. At my age, the winters, and I always loved New York. I loved Manhattan. I loved the seasons. I loved everything about being here. I mean, there's nothing, well, again, it's COVID, but pre-COVID, there's very few things, in my opinion, more beautiful than Christmas in Manhattan. I mean, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't love New York anymore because of what the parole board did to me. I mean, I accept full responsibility for what I did, but I think that the parole board was unduly harsh on me. I should not have spent 6 years. I should have been let out earlier. I've spoken to several top criminal attorneys who told me, were flabbergasted that I spent that much time. That is what it is. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. So I did the time, and that's okay. I can accept that. But because of what the parole board did, I no longer love New York. And the winters here are beginning to take their toll on me. I was going to my parole officer one day, and I wasn't allowed to drive yet. And I was walking to the bus stop and slipped on the ice. And I have a torn rotator cuff, which for 2.5 years now has been incredibly painful. I actually got the first bit of relief right before COVID with a treatment that my orthopedist gave. But the winters here can be tough. They're fun when you're young.
I still don't like them. I already don't like them.
I mean, Myrtle Beach sounds nice. Boca Raton sounds nice. At some point, I can't. My problem with that is I can't afford to do that right now. I could move to, some little town in Tennessee or Kentucky or West Virginia and live very nicely on Social Security. But that's not going to cut it in Florida or South Carolina. So I need to be gainfully employed.
Yeah.
And with the felony, that concerns me. That's I'm fearful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's understandable. Well, those were the end of the question, but I know that going into this class and this program, being able to talk to previously incarcerated people, it was amazing to see how we can really see how mindful you really are, especially when you talk. I hear you say I accept, and I feel like that's what it's all about, like acceptance, patience, and knowing that whatever happened, that you are where you are now, and that's what's important.
And if you're talking to other guys from network, I think you will primarily find the same thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not my education level, maybe not my whatever, but for the most part, yeah. I mean, like, Nashan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we were right, his bunk was right opposite mine.
Oh, wow.
And we would have some rip-roaring arguments. Our political views were markedly different. Our many views are markedly different, but there was a tremendous mutual respect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I loved Nishan. We called him Prince. That was his name in Otisville. And, I just developed an immense amount of respect. You can disagree with people and, still like them and have respect for them. And for the most part, the guys in network, and I'm in touch with several of them, who are still in. Many guys who are out already, but several who are still in. And these guys are different than most of the other inmates I've met because they are more in touch. They are more mindful. They're more aware. I mean, we did do a lot of programs. I taught French in network. We would play Jeopardy, and I was Alex Trebek, and and one other guy and I would write all the questions, and we did some really good stuff there. We made productive use of our time.
Yeah, and it's amazing because before I knew about network support services, I never would have guessed that someone that was incarcerated could have that mindset. It's amazing to see how much it can do.
Well, if when I write these parole appeals, especially for guys who are in network, I make note of the fact that the recidivism rate for network graduates is less than 1%.
Wow.
Which is an amazing statistic when you look at the fact that throughout New York State, I think the recidivism rate is about 45%.
Wow.
But among network graduates, among lifers in general, it's very low, but particularly among network graduates.
Yeah. There's so many stereotypes with people who are incarcerated, but there's so much that everybody doesn't know. And we are learning so much right now in that class, and you're like a perfect example of a person that's like that and that got so much from, although being incarcerated took away time, you still learn so much, and you learn to be mindful, which is honestly so important.
And I enjoyed helping people.
Yeah.
And I want to continue doing that. I learned what life is about. I learned what's important. And I learned that if I could live out of a locker for 6 years, doesn't matter what I have. My ex-wife, my daughter, brought a lot of things from my apartment to my ex-wife's house. And my ex-wife decided that she was angry with me. I don't know why. I guess because I went away. But she decided I can't have my things back. And I guess there was a time in my life when I would have, yelled and screamed and cursed at her. And my philosophy now is, you know what? If those things mean so much to you, you need them more than I do. I don't care.
Yeah.
I care that you would do something so foolish, but I don't care about the things. Just they're nice, but they don't mean very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and mindfulness without judgment is important, especially within yourself.
Yes. And I take great pride in the fact that I don't judge anybody. I don't care what you've done, who you are. Some of the guys that I've done work for successfully, and some even unsuccessfully, are people who I would have looked at one time and said, oh my God, you did this? Don't come anywhere near me. Not for me to judge. That's not my place. There is a judge and a jury who do that. That's not for me to do. I mean, I've done work for pedophiles. Would I want to necessarily be their friends? Not really. But, because that's just something that, I'm a dad. So, that bothers me. But still, it's not for me to judge, and it's okay. It's okay. They did their crime. My rabbi in Otisville, who we used to go to see every week, one of us once made a comment about a guy who was, in our little group there, but he's a pedophile. And the rabbi said, you're all criminals in one way or another. You've all done something wrong, and it's not for you to judge what this guy did or didn't do. And you can't shun him. That's not for us to say. And that meant a lot to me. I'm still in touch with that rabbi, by the way.
Okay, well, it was so nice to talk to you. Thank you for
Nice
sharing
Thank you.
everything.
My pleasure. And good luck with your course. I hope I was helpful.
Thank you. Yes, you were.
Thank you for everything.
Very
Thank
good.
you. And we're
All right,
going to send you the final bio and for your approval and see if everything's good.
You got it.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.